Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
David met Elena at a charity event hosted by the company he'd worked for years. He was accustomed to this kind of corporate obligation. But that day, something disrupted the routine. While discussing quarterly goals with colleagues, his eyes were drawn to a woman organizing giveaways with a lightness that contrasted with the serious atmosphere. Elena was smiling, her hair casually tied back, but her charm captivated him. They exchanged a few words when he went to grab a coffee. It was simple, no frills. But from that moment on, interest sparked. The subsequent meetings happened naturally. David, who never had been one to open up easily, realized he could talk to Elena effortlessly. She asked questions with genuine attention and laughed at his stories like they'd known each other for years. One night, after a casual dinner, she suggested they walk around town without any plan. They wandered through quiet streets, sharing childhood memories, old wounds, postponed dreams. That night marked something significant. It was as if both understood they had crossed a border without even realizing it. Over time, they started seeing each other more frequently. Neither mentioned labels or commitments, but both acted as if they were in a relationship. When Elena suggested he leave a spare set of clothes at her apartment, David got the message. A few months later, he was already living there. Weekends revolved around her preferences: museums, new cafes, hangouts with friends, spontaneous trips. David followed the rhythm because even though he preferred simpler things, he felt good by her side. She brought vitality to his days and he offered her stability. Marriage came almost as a consequence. There wasn't a dramatic proposal, just a conversation during dinner where both recognized they wanted to stay together. The ceremony was small, intimate, and after the party, everything continued smoothly. Married life began the same way their dating did: easy, practical, without big drama, but respectful. David made breakfast whenever he could. Elena handled household bills with discipline. On birthdays, they exchanged simple, sincere gifts. On regular nights, they watched shows together and supported each other through difficult times. It seemed like they were winning the challenge of coexistence without unnecessary drama. But there was something nobody said out loud. They were different. Elena needed movement, novelty, people around her. David valued silence, fixed schedules, weekends without plans. At first, that wasn't a problem. One would make concessions for the other. But over the years, these compromises started weighing down. He began declining party invitations, and she started traveling alone with her friends. Slowly, the moments they spent together became more practical than emotional. They fulfilled roles, but grew increasingly distant. Everything got worse after David received an offer to take over security management at a new company branch. It was a promotion he'd been waiting for years. With it came greater responsibilities, extra hours, and shifts outside regular business hours. In the first few months, Elena supported him. She said she understood that it was important for his career, but over time she stopped mentioning his job, avoided asking questions, and seemed increasingly disconnected. David, on the other hand, didn't clearly notice it. He'd come home tired, eat dinner in silence, go to bed early. He woke up before her and left for work without realizing anything was wrong. One night while finishing an important report, Elena walked into the room and asked if he remembered their anniversary. David stopped what he was doing, looked at her, and realized he had no idea of the date. She didn't complain, just said, "It's okay," and left the room. That bothered him for days, but since she didn't bring it up again, he thought it was resolved. But within that small forgetfulness lay a chasm. Elena was emotionally pulling away and David still hadn't noticed. Meanwhile, weekends became lonelier. David focused on work and Elena went out more often. When she was home, she stayed on her phone or long calls with friends. When David tried starting deeper conversations, she said she was tired. He began accepting that silence as part of the routine. He believed phases like that were normal, that everything would adjust with time. But what David didn't know was that at that very moment, the foundation of their relationship had already begun crumbling. And although everything seemed calm on the surface, inside Elena was already somewhere else. And this absence, as silent as the way everything began, would be the warning sign of what was yet to come. Elena told him she'd spend the weekend in a neighboring city with Rebecca, a college friend. She said she needed to breathe a little, clear her head, reconnect with herself. David found the tone strange, but chose to respect it. They had talked about personal space before, and Elena always made it clear she needed time away occasionally. He replied with a simple, "Take care," without asking questions. He was busy with accumulated deadlines and believed insisting at that moment would only make things tenser. That same night, while trying to use the tablet to check a work document, he noticed Elena had left the device unlocked. The screen still showed an interrupted conversation. David wasn't the type to snoop, but something about the name on the screen, Marcus, caught his attention. The conversation looked recent, and there were emojis he'd never seen Elena use with him. He read only 3 or 4 messages, enough to understand that the story about a trip with Rebecca had another reason. He immediately closed the app, breathing unevenly, trying to think before reacting. The next morning, he hesitated before making the call. Rebecca answered with a low voice as if she were in another place. David got straight to the point. He asked if Elena was with her. On the other end, an uncomfortable silence filled the line. Rebecca hesitated. When she spoke again, she said she didn't want to get involved, that she didn't know what Elena had told him, but she preferred not to lie. Then, with a contained sigh, she added Elena wasn't with her. There had been no planned trip between them. David thanked her, hung up, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall for long minutes. All Sunday, he sent no message, no call, didn't ask where she was. He simply waited. When Elena returned home late afternoon, the sound of the key turning in the lock brought a strange feeling. She walked in acting normally, as if coming back from a retreat. She carried bags, had a different hairstyle, wore a perfume David had never smelled before. He waited for her to finish putting things away and calmly asked how her weekend had been. Elena responded without looking in his eyes, mentioning scenery, restaurants, deep conversations. David just listened, and when she finished speaking, he asked just one question. "Who is Marcus?" The name came out like a blade and Elena turned pale. It took time before she could say anything. She tried to dodge, said he was someone from work, that they had gotten close, but it wasn't what he was thinking. David kept his gaze steady, silent. Elena looked away, paced the room, came back, and sat on the couch. When she spoke again, everything changed. She didn't try denying it. She said she was confused, that the connection with David had been lost, that she had felt distant for months, and that Marcus appeared when she felt invisible. She called the involvement accidental, said she didn't want it to happen, but it did. David didn't argue, he didn't yell, didn't slam doors, he just listened. Each sentence seemed to add to a new feeling. At the same time, he felt the ground disappear. He also started realizing part of this had been happening for a long time. Elena talked for nearly 20 minutes. She explained the relationship began with conversations, then brief meetings outside working hours, and that she only realized how involved she was when she considered ending the marriage. She said it with unsettling calmness. That night, David slept in the guest bedroom. No fights, no promises. The next morning, before leaving for work, he left a short handwritten note on the table. It simply said he would start organizing the divorce. Elena saw the note when she woke up. She cried alone in the kitchen, but she already knew this was the outcome of a choice she had made weeks earlier. The following days were strange. They still lived in the same place, but barely spoke. David started coming home later, avoiding common areas. Elena avoided any attempt at conversation that might reignite the subject. When the divorce papers arrived, both signed quickly, like closing a contract that expired long ago. There was no fight over possessions. No arguments about who would keep what. The only thing remaining besides silence were scattered memories spread across the house. And even as the end approached, David didn't feel hatred. He felt exhaustion. As if he were exhausted from fighting for something that no longer existed. The memories of the good moments didn't comfort him. They only reminded him of everything lost. What hurt most wasn't the betrayal, but the way everything had died silently, without screams, without dramatic breakups, just a gradual abandonment he didn't notice while trying to maintain the routine. As David signed the final documents, he understood something that would change how he viewed relationships from then on. Sometimes the end doesn't come when the other person leaves. The end begins when the person beside you has already been somewhere else for a long time. The divorce process moved forward almost coldly, bureaucratically, like a formal transaction between two strangers. David handled every step with a precision that surprised even the lawyers involved. While Elena seemed hesitant, avoiding prolonged eye contact and discussions, David showed a calmness born from a strange mix of pain and acceptance. He didn't want punishment, didn't seek confrontation. He just wanted to close this story that had already been written to its last line. In the days leading up to Elena's move out, she packed her belongings in silence. She separated books, clothes, and personal items without much ceremony. Each full box was like confirmation that all of this really had ended. On the last day, before closing the door behind her, Elena paused for a moment, looked at David from a distance, and softly said she hoped he'd be okay. He simply watched her without responding. Their final silence said more than any long goodbye ever could. After she left, David sat on the couch and stayed there for hours. The emptiness around him didn't feel new. It was just the physical version of what he had been feeling inside for a long time. The weeks that followed were like decompression. David resumed his schedule, dove deeper into work, and tried filling the gaps left by shared life. He didn't seek distractions or adventures. He was rebuilding himself. Gradually, he relearned how to live differently now without needing to negotiate TV volume, dinner menus, or the social invitations Elena used to make. It was like returning to an old lifestyle, only with more scars. One day, while having coffee at the office, he received a message from his brother Nathan. It was simple: "I saw Elena today. She was with that guy. I think they got married." David stared at the screen for a few seconds, smiled slightly, and put the phone away. That news, which months earlier would have torn him apart, now sounded like confirmation of something he already knew, even without proof. Elena hadn't just left. She already had another home before she even left his. That didn't generate anger. It created a kind of uncomfortable peace, like understanding finally that he never really had a choice in the outcome. The following week, he went to a store to buy some things for the apartment. He was remodeling his home office, creating a more functional space. Between aisles, he saw a couple quietly arguing near the curtain section. When he looked closer, he immediately recognized the two faces. Elena, with shorter, lighter hair, gestured toward a fabric sample. Marcus stood beside her, carrying a basket of decor items. At first, David thought about turning and going the other way, but it was too late. Elena saw him first. Her eyes widened for a second, but she quickly gave a restrained smile. Marcus also noticed David, but remained still, visibly uncomfortable. David walked toward them. He stopped at a respectful distance, looked at Elena, and simply said, "Hi." She responded with the same word, and for a few seconds, they stood face to face like old schoolmates meeting by chance. Marcus didn't say anything. David then wished them well and said goodbye. He turned and walked away like someone closing a chapter with a clean period. Later, when he got home, David sat in his newly built office and opened a box of old papers. Among folders and notes, he found a small envelope. Inside, a letter Elena wrote in their first month of marriage. She wrote about future plans, about the fear of getting lost in routine, and ended by saying, "If one day I change and don't have the courage to say it, I hope you understand before I leave." David read that sentence 3 times. He realized the answer to everything had been there all along. Elena didn't leave the day of the separation. She started leaving long before, bit by bit, invisibly hidden in ordinary days. And he, trying to preserve what they had, chose not to see. As he put the letter away, David understood that the real end of a relationship doesn't come with the signing of papers. It comes with the first long silence, the first indifferent gesture, the first tolerated lie. And when a reunion happens, like the one at the store, what surprises you most isn't seeing the other person with someone new, but the absence of pain. Because the lack of pain is the biggest proof that even though it once hurt, everything passed. And with that, life starts again. 2 years had passed since that encounter at the store. David continued his life simply. He kept working, completely remodeled the apartment, took short trips during vacations, and reconnected with old friends. Sometimes he went on dates, talked to someone for a few weeks, but nothing lasted. He didn't avoid love, he just didn't force it. He learned to enjoy his own company, to value the peace of being whole again after being fragmented inside. Even though there was space for someone new, he wasn't ready to reopen old doors. On a Tuesday morning, while organizing emails before heading out, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from a number he had forgotten, but the name appeared as if time had frozen for a second. Elena. The message was short. She said she wanted to talk, that she didn't expect anything, but if he agreed, she could meet him at a downtown cafe on Friday at 4 p.m. David stared at the screen for a few minutes. He took a deep breath, blocked immediate judgment, and simply replied, "Okay." On Friday, he arrived a few minutes early and chose a table near the window. The cafe had changed little since the last time he was there. Soon, he saw Elena walking in. She looked different, more simple, without heavy makeup, without urgency in her eyes. When she saw him, she smiled nervously, and approached. He stood up, greeted her with a discreet handshake, and they sat down. Elena ordered milk coffee. David stuck with espresso. For several minutes, they talked about obvious things, work changes, trivialities, but soon silence showed she had come for another reason. Elena confessed that her marriage to Marcus hadn't lasted. She said he was good at first, but over time became exactly what she thought she wanted, and discovered it didn't complete her. She said she felt incomplete, regretted many things, and only now could admit to herself that David had been the true love of her life. David listened carefully. He didn't interrupt. Elena, with teary eyes, explained she didn't expect an immediate restart, but needed to speak. She said she thought of him often, missed the conversations, the simple gestures, and understood it might be too late, but still needed to try. She finished by saying she didn't want to force anything, just open a door in case he wanted it. David let silence fill the table for a few seconds. Then calmly and without changing his tone, he replied, "Thank you for the invitation and for being honest, but what we were belongs to the past. What we had has dissolved a long time ago. I've moved on. You've moved on, too, just through different paths. We learned valuable lessons together. But not every true love needs to last forever. Sometimes it just teaches." Elena looked at him trying to hold back tears. David continued, "I wish you well, but there's no us anymore, and that's okay. The important thing is acceptance." He called the waiter, paid the bill without ceremony, stood up, and gave her a final firm look. "Take care of yourself." He turned and walked out. He walked the downtown sidewalks without looking back. For the first time, this story had a final statement spoken aloud, without bitterness, without nostalgia, only truth and peace. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.